Welcome back to the NonDē Filmmaking Legal Lab. Hi, I'm Mike Rekola, and today, like the whole week, office hours have gone nightly. That's because it's night 4 of the February Clean Chain of Title sprint. Each day, I sent out a quick email with a mission designed to be short enough to do before breakfast, but impactful enough to do to save your production. Tonight, I'm here to be an educational resource for the next 10 to 15 minutes or so. First, before we dive in the rules of the road, I'm an attorney, but I am not your attorney. Nothing we say here creates an attorney-client relationship. This is educational guidance only for the independent film community. If you have a specific legal emergency, please hire local counsel. Second, please do not share any personal or sensitive information. It's best to keep all questions hypothetical rather than asking any direct questions about direct people or direct problems. Finally, if you would like to ask a question, simply type it in the chat or throw an emoji in the chat, and I'll bring you up on stage. When you do come up on stage, I'd ask you to introduce yourself, give us a quick little log line, and affirmatively state that you understand that this is an educational resource. So let's look at our clean chain of title sprint. Like I said, we've had 4 days of actual events, but 5 tasks. Before we begin, if anyone has any questions, again, feel free to put them in the chat. I kind of flip-flopped my days yesterday and today, so I'm sorry. Yesterday was actually crew, but I talked at office hours about locations. So today we'll actually talk about crews. So the number one thing you want to be careful about with crews is you want to look and find your crew deal memo. And you want to see for your director of photography, for your sound mixer, for everyone listed, you want to check to make sure that the contract states that it is a work made for hire. That way you own the copyright to their work. If the contract is silent about work made for hire and or the contract simply states contract or relationship or services, that means that that individual will maintain and will own your copyright, or excuse me, the copyright to the material that they recorded. If they were a director of photography, that's the stuff they recorded on camera. If they're a sound mixer, that's the stuff they recorded when they're during production. So the number one thing you want to do is make sure you use the correct crew deal memo and make sure that you have work made for hire in that agreement. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about locations quickly. So the number one important clause that you want to see in any contract is you want to see if there is a no injunctive release clause. A no injunctive relief clause prevents a disgruntled landlord from suing you if, say, you scratch their floors. They can try and stop your movie from coming out. But if you have a no injunctive release clause, that would actually prevent anyone from actually stopping your film from being released. It would allow them to sue you for monetary damages, but it would prevent them from stopping the actual release of the film. So your mission for that day on locations was to find your location agreement for your primary sets and locations, rename the file, drop it into the proper folder, and then do the quick red flag check, which is about injunctive relief. So again, you're all good if it says the owner is limited to monetary damages and waives the right to enjoin or restrain the distribution. You're at risk if it's missing that language. A judge can issue a court order to block the release of your film. Say if the landlord claims that you scratched their floors and they want to be paid, then you have to pay them first before you can release the films. So it looks like we have a quick question. It looks like it's from Lucas. I'll read it aloud. Hi, I'm Lucas. I'm an experimental filmmaker. If, for example, I were to film in a public space being renovated, like a square by a city government, would I still need a location contract to show this work, even though it's public property? So generally what you need to make sure is that it is actually public property. And then you should be all okay to film there. You want to make sure you get permission of anyone who's filming there, meaning like if people are walking by, give them notice that you're filming and things like that, especially if you show their faces. But for the actual permission to use the lands, like if it's a park, generally you're okay. Now, however, there is some wrinkles if it's like state parks or national forests or things like that. You might have to follow city and town procedures, but if it's simple sidewalks, simple parking lots, things of that nature, you should be okay. again, a lot of times what you want to think about is what is the risk? If you're shooting in a public area and it's only going to be for a little bit, and your distributor's probably not going to require a location. But if you're shooting in a McDonald's and you're showing the logos of that McDonald's and everyone knows it's a McDonald's, then you're probably going to need to have locations um, of that McDonald's. Okay. We got Lucas again. So Lucas says, and what about private buildings filmed outside locations? So this can be a tricky one. Generally, you're pretty much all set, but the thing you need to be careful about is copyright. So if it's a registered trademark of a logo on the side of the building, if it's a very visually stunning, architecturally designed building where an artist might claim that it is a piece of work, a piece of artwork, as opposed to just a building, and so the building itself is designed and kind of seen as an outpost of that artist's creations. So again, private property, if you're on the outside, you're probably going to be okay because you're in a public setting, you're in a public street, you're capturing things that are out and open to the public. Um, what you want to be careful for is those little nuances where it's like capturing someone's logo or um, capturing something that is uniquely stunning that might be made by an artist that an artist could complain against. Now, again, if it's architecture, it's highly unlikely. Um, and even then, who's to say that the artist would complain? But you just want to think about it. It's all about managing risk. Okay, let's look into kind of our organizational structure. So remember, when we're filing our chain of title, we want to have 5 buckets. We want to have underlying rights, which are your scripted story, your talent, which is your cast, your crew, which is your production, your locations, which is your permits and releases, and your music and score. So make sure you have those 5 buckets. They'll help you stay completely organized. Now, your script. Again, one of the most important things about your script is making sure that work made for hire is in that as well. So it's important in your crew, it's important in your script, and it's also going to be important in your music composer's agreement. So again, if it's silent, if your contract is silent on copyright, then that's a bad deal. That means your writer probably retains copyright. So what you're going to need to do is have them execute a quick claim deed or a new writer's agreement. Finally, the last couple of things we'll talk about really quickly is actors. So again, actors in their contracts and releases, you want to make sure there's 2 new clauses that you want to look for besides the work made for hire and all that other stuff. Is you want to look for the ability to dub or edit the talent so that you can make slight adjustments as needed. And then you want to be respectful of their AI likenesses and permissions. You don't want to use AI, but you do want to have a slight clause that allows you to use AI to say edit a blink of the eye, something really small, really fractionally that wouldn't change it, but also doesn't betray their right to autonomy as an actor or actress. So here's your homework for the week. Follow around along in the challenges. There's only, I believe, 3 days left. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'll be done after that. And then by the time you're done, when your distributor asks you for your chain of title, you'll be able to zip it into a folder and send it to them in 5 minutes instead of worrying, stressing, and you'll be able to go out, have a drink with friends, and celebrate. So stay tuned. We got one more lesson coming tomorrow, and get out there and get to work. Thanks for attending, everyone. Have a great night.